wrapping up the year 2020 in documentary film. We're going to talk about 15 documentaries that I saw over the last few months here from 2020, including all 5 of the Best Documentary Feature nominees at this year's Oscars. Hey everybody, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my 2020 doc wrap-up. We've already reviewed a few documentaries on the channel throughout the last year. The Go-Go's, Class Action Park, there were a few in the mix, including one of the ones that is up for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars called Time. I will leave my link to that review in the description below because I did a whole 7-8 minute review on that one. But I'm just going to kind of bust through these because we have 15 documentaries to talk about. So I'm just going to basically say the name of it, a brief little thing about what it's about. I'll tell you who directed it. I'll tell you if it was nominated or won any major documentary awards, and I'll tell you where you can find it. So let's start with the 5 that are up for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. Like I said, I already did review one of them, and that is the movie Time. I gave that a B. I did not think it was among the year's top 5 documentaries for sure, and you can find out why if you click on the description below. But I gave that one a B. So let's talk about the other 4 before we move into some other things. So first up, Crip Camp. This is available on Netflix. It was up for the Sundance Audience Award for documentary. It is an Oscar nominee, like I mentioned, and it was up for 6 documentary awards at the Critics' Choice. It won one of those. This is directed by Nicole Newham and James Lebrecht. This is about a camp of physically disabled youth in the 70s, and now they are sort of coming back together in recent times to sort of talk about their experiences and talk about what this camp meant to them. This is a beautiful documentary. I think this one should win of all the 5 best documentaries that are up. It might be my favorite documentary of the year. It's just a very, very touching story. It is great to meet all of these people and to hear their individual experiences. I remember, in the 80s growing up, my brother's best friend was in a wheelchair, and that was, wow, like somebody that is unlike me physically, and it never even occurred to me that all the way back in the 70s there would be, these really cool camps for people that have physical disabilities. I think it's so neat, and it was so great to watch all the footage from that. I loved this movie, so this one gets an A from me. Another nominee for Best Documentary at the Oscars is My Octopus Teacher. This one's on Netflix as well. It was directed by Pippa Ehrlich and James Reed. And this is an interesting one. I've been doing a lot of nature documentary reviews lately in the old Disney camp on my Dan Does Disney series, and those date back to the 50s. But I haven't seen too many recent nature documentaries. And this one is really cool in that not only do we meet this octopus and some of his little friends under the sea, but this is more of a story of the bond formed between this diver and the octopus. And it's a little bit too technical for my liking in terms of education. I wanted to know more about, I guess, the people and their relationship to the octopus as opposed to learning about the octopus specifically and what most octopi, what they do and da-da-da-da-da. But I thought this was very gripping, very fun too, and really great undersea cinematography for sure. So I leave My Octopus Teacher with an A-. Next is Collective. This is available on Hulu. It is Oscar nominated as well, and it is up for 2 awards. Actually, it's up for Best Documentary Feature, but it's also up for Best International Feature because it is from Romania. It was their selection this year, and so it is all in Romanian. It was directed by Alexander Nanau, I want to say, and this is really I think a groundbreaking documentary. This is about it's starting with this fire at a club called Collective at this concert that killed a bunch of people, but the fire itself didn't kill them. What killed them a lot of them, was the healthcare system and the corruption in hospitals and the government and healthcare. And so this movie takes a deep dive into all of that stuff in Romania. And my God, the parallels between the healthcare system in Romania and the crappy healthcare system in the United States is startling. But this documentary takes a look at a new party that was formed politically to sort of combat this. And what's most striking about this documentary is that it is actually shot much like a narrative drama film. Like, it reminded me of Spotlight and some of these things that are, expose type films, but it's not. It's not written. This is all documentary live stuff, and the ability to get cameras in certain places, to hear some of these conversations is incredible. I really thought this was a well done documentary. I'm going to leave this one with an A- as well. And then finally, up for best documentary feature at the Oscars is The Mole Agent. This is on Hulu as well. This was on the National Board of Review's top 5 foreign language films. This won World Cinema Documentary at Sundance, and it was directed by Maite Alberti, perhaps. And this basically is an expose of mistreatment and abuse in old folks' homes. And what they do is they sort of audition older people in the beginning to sort of be that mole that will go in and pretend like they're a patient, but really they're a spy. And this definitely gets the job done in terms of letting us know about the different, abuses that go on in these homes. And it's, horrible to see. But they take sort of a comedy bent with it too, because they've got this, guy who they decide to make the spy, and just the audition process is sort of comical, and then he's sort of funny himself in his own way. And what's the best part of, I think, of this documentary, because I don't think it's that shocking that there's abuse in nursing homes, but it's the relationships he makes inside the homes that really sort of drive the story, and the characters within that really are driving things here. So, I think there's a little bit of a tonal mixture here that I'm not sure I loved, but overall, I thought this was a really well done movie. I don't know if it deserves the nomination, though. That's the thing. A lot of these movies I'm going to talk about next, I've rated much higher. So, yes, this is maybe something new in its execution, but I'm not sure how well tonally it all worked out. So I leave The Mole Agent with a B. So let's talk about the two others now that were on the short list for the documentary Oscar, but did not make the nominee list. The first is Dick Johnson is Dead. This is on Netflix right now. It did win the Sundance Doc Award as well, Chicago Film Critics Association, Independent Spirits Award. So it got nominated or won all of those things, and it was on the Oscar short list. It's directed by Kristen Johnson, and it is about her father, Dick Johnson, who is now in his 80s, and she's a documentary filmmaker that's made a couple of other docs. I'm not sure if I've seen any of them, although some of the names of them were familiar to me, but this is mostly about her dad, who is realizing that he is not long for this world. He's in his 80s, and he's always sort of pondering, I think, like a lot of us do, what will my death be like? What will my funeral be like? Da, 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 da. So his daughter decided to make this her next documentary film, and put him in some acted out situations where he dies in different ways, and then they sort of animate some things as well around that. But then, they get to see, how that might happen, and we get to see his funeral, what that might be like. But, this one, it's interesting, and it certainly, look, I'm a person that does think about, like, well, how will I be remembered, and, that kind of thing. I think we all sort of have at least a phase of that, if not, longer than that. I think I've been thinking about that for a long time. But, what is unfortunate here is it does seem that his mental faculties are diminishing a little bit. We see some things of, early onset Alzheimer's and dementia here as we're filming. And part of this movie seemed actually a little bit cruel, because he would be like, I don't really want to do this, this scene today. I'm not sure if I want to do this. And she'll be like, oh no, it'll be fine. Like, talking him into it. And it like, he'll do it because he loves his daughter. But I, as the viewer, was a little uncomfortable sometimes watching it because it just seemed like he wasn't that comfortable doing some of this stuff. So that sort of had a bad taste with me a little bit. But other than that, I found it pretty fun and enjoyable, and certainly thought provoking as well, and very original too. So I leave Dick Johnson is Dead with a B plus. Up next, another Oscar shortlist nominee that did not make the cut. I think it would have been very, very wise to put this one in. It's one of my favorite docs of the year. Welcome to Chechnya. This is on HBO Max right now. It won Best Documentary at the Berlin Film Festival. It was a Sundance nominee for Best Doc, and it was directed by David France. This is all about being gay or being, anything in the LGBTQ, line in Russia, and how dangerous it is, how scary it is, how they basically want you dead. A gay purge basically is sort of bandied about in this movie. That's kind of what it is. So this really goes undercover to talk to some of the people who got out, talk to some of the people who are rescuing these people. Very, very intense stuff. Hard to watch for sure, although there is a little bit of humor involved too. But very, very hard on the old gut, especially as a gay person myself. I really, it's frightening out there in a lot of countries for gay people, and that's no surprise and no secret. But what this does actually is goes deeper and really talks to the people who are getting the people out of that situation and that kind of thing. So I thought this was a really, really good one. It's an A minus for me on Welcome to Chechnya. All right, so now these other ones are just documentaries I watched the last few months that I have not reviewed yet for the show. Some of them were nominated or won different awards, but none of them were even on the Oscar shortlist or anything. Just stuff I wanted to talk about. And most of them I sought out because either the subject matter interested me or I heard good things about it. So we'll just keep on HBO Max here and talk about a couple there. The Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? This is directed by Frank Marshall. It's a biography of the Bee Gees, from their start back in the 60s up until not really the present day because two of the three have passed. So basically until sort of the end of their touring career, when the brothers started to die. And there's one left alive, and then the others we do see in this movie in archival footage from the last, 10 or 15 years or whatever. But look, I'm a Bee Gees fan. I think most people are. To be honest, even if you don't necessarily know it. I mean, everybody knows Staying Alive and a lot of their big hit songs from Saturday Night Fever, etc., and maybe some of their other ones as well. I thought this was a really well done documentary. I learned a lot. And look, you can't beat the soundtrack, it just goes through all their hits in the background as they're talking or as they're discussing, making that hit or whatever. Some very, very good stuff. I do think it spends a little too much time on brother Andy Gibb, who was not technically a Bee Gee. He was just one of their brothers, and he had his own solo career. He died very young in the 80s. I think he was maybe in his early 30s when he passed. But they spend, a bit too much time, I think, on him, since it's called the Bee Gees, not the Gibb brothers. And as well, they spend a big chunk of the documentary on Saturday Night Fever and its impact and its the downfall of disco and all of that. And then they're also saying, like, well, we did so much more than disco. We're so much more than a disco band. Why is a third of this documentary then spent on the disco movement? I'm not sure. But I certainly learned a lot. Great music and great soundtrack, of course. I leave this one with a B+. John Lewis, Good Trouble. That is on HBO Max as well. It won an NAACP Image Award for Best Documentary, and it had 3 nominations at the Critics' Choice Doc Awards. It's directed by Dawn Porter, and this, of course, is a bio of the late John Lewis, who passed just last summer, and his impact basically on Black lives in America, his impact on the government, his impact on, a lot of things, and his friendship with Martin Luther King back in the 60s, et cetera, et cetera. I'll be honest, when he passed last year, I didn't know much about him. I sort of knew the name, but, it wasn't something that I really had ever looked into. And I'm glad that this documentary exists. It's a bit basic, it's just your standard bio about a political figure. We go through the paces of all the beats, but I found it very informative, and they plucked some really interesting interview snippets from his entire life that I thought was very well done. So that one gets an A minus from me. One that is sort of in the same vein as both of those movies, John Lewis and the Bee Gees, because it covers politics and music, is Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. You can get this one on demand. It was directed by Mary Wharton, and it not only is a look at Jimmy Carter as a president, but more specifically, how rock and roll and music impacted the election, his presidency, and then still to this day, with all his Habitat for Humanity stuff and his humanitarianism, all of that is sort of sprinkled with interviews. Now, of course, Jimmy Carter's still with us, so there are interviews with him as well. But since the focus is the music, there's interviews with a lot of those musicians from back in the day that are still alive, and then also some more contemporary musicians like Bono and Garth Brooks that have worked with him on the Habitat for Humanity side of things. I thought this was interesting. I thought they could have maybe focused a little more on the political side of things and not just, okay, well, he was a fan of the Grateful Dead, so that was, cool, and the hippies all voted for him. It's a little basic in that respect, but, I thought it was interesting enough. I give this one a B. All right, so moving sort of off of the political thing, but let's go back to music for a second. Netflix, Miss Americana. This is a documentary about Taylor Swift, and this was a top 5 doc for the National Board of Review. More than a dozen magazines had this on their best of for 2020. It's directed by Lana Wilson, and I can see why this is on so many year-end lists. This is easily one of my favorites of the year. I'm a little surprised this one wasn't even on the Oscar shortlist for Best Documentary. I really am, because I loved this. And look, I am a Swift fan. I wouldn't say I'm a mega fan. She's not my favorite artist or anything, but, I followed her career, as many of us have, for the last 12, 13 years since she was, 16 years old. And this sort of takes us through just the current stuff. I mean, yes, it peppers in some of the stuff about her history, but this is more about a moment in time for Taylor Swift. And I think that's why this documentary works so well. It's all about her making her latest album, which is now, I guess, 2 albums ago, because she put one out last year. But it takes us through that journey. And this was such a pivotal album for her for 2 reasons. Number one, she had lost best, album of the year at the Grammys, and that sort of put her off a little bit. And she was like, well, now I got to work, harder to get that, accolade next time. But aside from that, this is right after she had her entire catalog basically stolen from her by the record label that she was recording for those first 5 albums. That was a big news story that I remember following. But in addition to that, this was a flashpoint for her, because she basically entered talking about politics, and specifically trying to get Donald Trump out of office, and trying to get these Democratic leaders voted in her home state, because she saw things going south. And she has always been a huge supporter of gay rights. I mean, she has a huge gay fan base, obviously, like all the great divas do. And so, when there were laws going into place that she didn't really feel aligned with her audience, she was like, you know what, I'm taking a stand, F you, going against the thought of all of her handlers and her agent and all of that. She was like, no, this is important. This is going to be a touchstone in my career. And I think it was. So we got enough other docs to get to, so I will leave it there. But I give this an A. It might be my favorite documentary of the year. I do have to make my countdown at some point, but I leave Miss Americana with an A. All right, let's keep it on Netflix for these next few here. Let's see. All right, The Social Dilemma. Let's talk about that. This was a nominee for the Critics' Choice Doc Awards and also the Chicago Film Critics Association. It's directed by Jeff Orlowski. I'm a little shocked, to be honest, that this thing got nominated, because it's kind of a mess. It's basically about Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, how all of that stuff impacts our daily lives, how it impacts our moods, how it impacts relationships, da-da-da-da-da. And it's very interesting in that regard, but then there's about a third of it that goes the scripted route. And it's like very corny, and it's got people that we know. It's got Vincent Kartheiser in it, and the nerdy kid that was in Santa Clarita Diet and the Vacation reboot. Um, and it's like he's obsessed with his phone, and it's like we see his moods change, and that stuff is so weird, and it takes me right out of it. If you're going to be a documentary, be a documentary, especially on social media. There's so many different studies you can cite and talk to scientists and talk to, you can talk to people that we know and love that are big on social media too, and talk about how it has impacted them positively. We could have, that outlook on it too. But to have the whole scripted thing is very bizarre. So it took me right out every single time. So I leave Social Dilemma with a B minus. Next is Athlete A. This was up for 5 nominations at the Critics' Choice Awards for documentaries, and it won Best Sports Documentary. It's called Athlete A, and it was directed by John Schenk and Bonnie Cohen, and it's about some very, very serious sexual assault charges levied by a bunch of women from the Olympic gymnastics team over several different years, and how it impacted the girls' lives. And it takes actually a few different avenues, because they talk sort of with the Olympians that lived through it, but then they also talk with the press about what they knew, and what was covered up, and this and that and the other thing. And it's one of these expose type movies, very, very interesting. I do think maybe there's more ground to cover there, because it is just about an hour and a half. I think we could have covered more ground here and really dove even deeper into some of these issues, because it's really sad. I mean, these girls, many of them, their innocence was just taken from them, and by their Olympic doctors, and all of this. It's just, ugh. But I could have used more in that regard of like, okay, let's dig even deeper into some of these things, and find out more, and find out what else was covered up and by whom. But I liked this one. I give it a B plus overall. Next is Disclosure: Trans Lives on Screen. This is directed by Sam Feder. You can get this one on Netflix as well. This one is another contender for me for Best Documentary of 2020. I loved this movie. It's all about trans people in movies and television. How trans people, since the beginning of film back in the 1900s and 1910s, men in dresses and things like that, how they've been viewed back then, and how they've been portrayed and presented all the way through the present day. Here's one I actually thought about doing a standalone review on, because I could talk for a while about this movie. As a gay man, I know how gay people have been sort of treated in media over the years, but being trans, I hadn't thought about a lot of things that negatively have impacted them. For example, Ace Ventura, people throwing up when they find out, that the woman is a man, and the crying game, and things like that. In the 90s, that was sort of a hot button issue, because you could actually talk about people being trans in the movies and TV, but it was always in a negative light. And they interviewed a lot of, current famous trans people, including Laverne Cox, of course, about their interpretations of things. And one of the most interesting things for me that came out of this is that a lot of people agree that Bugs Bunny is actually one of the most positive effects of being trans on screen, especially from so long ago, because he always sort of worked it, and he was intelligent, and they went into like how a lot of times they'll have people being serial killers as trans people, Silence of the Lambs, for example, or CSI shows or whatever. And Bugs was never like that. He always got one over on Yosemite Sam or Elmer Fudd. He always won out. So I thought that was interesting. I love this movie. Definitely recommended. That's an A for me. 2 more to go through. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. I'm really busting through these. All right, so A Secret Love is next. This is on Netflix. It was a Critics' Choice Doc Award nominee. It was directed by Chris Bolan, and this takes a look at a lesbian couple, one of who was in the female baseball, team era back in the 40s, like League of Their Own style. I don't think she was actually on like the Rockford Peaches or anything, but she was in that league. And her partner, and how they've spent the last 50, 60 years mainly in secret because of, how things were back then. Look, yes, there's a little bit of a running theme through some of these docs. Like I said, there are things that spoke to me, that seemed interesting to me personally. So yes, some of these docs do have a bit of a LGBTQ lead to them. But this one I actually didn't love that much, and here's why: because they spent the entire film with these two women and their lives and their families and everything. And that's fine. It's great. I enjoyed getting to know them. But it made it sort of seem like they're the anomaly, when I think they could have actually delved deeper and taken over like 4 or 5 different couples that have been together for, 40 plus years or whatever, and their experience. Because yes, they're probably fairly similar, but depending on where in America you grew up, maybe things were a little bit different here or there. So I would have really liked to have seen a variety of couples, going into this, all with the same umbrella, but the movie almost makes it seem like this is an anomaly, and I don't think it is. I mean, I know certainly some gay couples that have been around for 20, 30 plus years that, had to live in secret for a long, long time. So I feel like, they really could have done a better job of talking about that. And I would have liked to have known those other couples too. I'm not sure that these guys necessarily merited an entire movie just about them, So I leave A Secret Love with a B. And then finally, we have GameMaster. This is something that really speaks to me. I am a board gamer. I'm a strategy gamer. It's available on Amazon Prime. It was directed by Charles Mraz. And listen, this is going to be a very sort of niche documentary. Most of the docs I've talked about, you could, anybody who's anybody can learn something from it. It's engaging. This, I think, has a very specific audience. It is gamers. I mean, they talk about, a lot of these real specific games and how they're created and the process that you have to go through to sort of step-by-step design the game and present the game and da-da-da-da-da. They talk to some famous people. To me, the creator of Catan is in there, one of my favorite games of all time. Okay, cool. But I feel like this documentary is probably pretty meaningless to anybody who's not into the subject matter. So I leave this one with a C+, GameMaster. All right, that's it. We did 15 reviews in less than a half hour. That was my goal, and we did it. So definitely the ones to check out. I'll remind you again, the ones I gave A's to, Crip Camp, I hope that one wins, because I think that's my favorite that's up for Best Picture at the Docs, or Best Documentary Picture at the Oscars. Disclosure, Trans Lives on Screen, Crip Camp, and Miss Americana are all of my A's for docs for the year, and they're all 3 on Netflix, actually. So Netflix having a good track record with the documentary. So that will do it. I have just a few 2020 movies to go. I just watched my last couple Oscar nominees: Pinocchio, Another Round, and Love and Monsters. I don't know if I'm going to get to all the foreign nominees, but Collective is one of those, so I hit that already. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully you can check some of these out. Hopefully I turned you on to a few, and we'll see you back here next time for another review on Dan Reviews It. Bye.